Hello, this is Mr. Kent of the Bible blog at mrkent.com, and thank you for stopping by to listen and watch the video. Today we're going to be covering the 33rd chapter of Genesis, chapter 33, and I'll be using I'll be reading from the New King James Version. When I put something on the screen, it will be from the King James Version, so there will be a little bit difference in what I'm saying and what you read there. Or you can, just if you're watching on the website, you can click on the link just to the right of this video and go to BibleGateway.com and bring it up, and you can follow along with just all kinds of different Bible references. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get started. And let's review a little bit, because in chapter 32, Jacob had departed from Laban, his uncle, and he was in the mountains of Gilead, which is just up to the east of the Sea of Galilee. And he and Laban said goodbye to each other, and then he sent a message ahead to his brother Esau, who he hadn't seen for 20 years. And of course, the last time he saw Esau, Esau wanted to kill him. But 20 years have gone by now, and God had told Jacob to leave Padan Haran and go down into the promised land, the land of Canaan, and go back to his family and his father. And Esau is his family. So for one reason or another, he sent a message ahead, and then his messengers returned. This was in chapter 32, telling him that Esau was coming to meet him with 400 men. So now Jacob's a little bit panicked. And my theory on this is that back in those days, when you traveled on the highways and roads that they had, you had to have a large group of people with you to defend you because of vandals and so forth. So I'm thinking that's probably why his brother came with the 400 men, but that's not what Jacob thought, and that's not what a lot of other Bible scholars think. They think that Esau was still mad, but he's had 20 years, and we'll start with verse 1 of chapter 33 and look at what happens now. Jacob had put his family just south of the brook Jabbok, Jabbok, and then he'd gone back to the north side, and then overnight he wrestled all night long with a man of God, and that's when he got his name changed to Israel. And of course he prevailed. He didn't. The man of God could have whipped him, but he didn't. And that's the way God treats us. So anyway, now he's limping, and it's morning. And verse 1 of chapter 33, now Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and there Esau was coming, and with him were 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maidservants. So now he's panicking. And verse 2, you got to remember that God had told him he's going to take care of him. He's told him that several times. But he's like me and you. He forgets the promises of God. And he's kind of a crook. So, crooks always think like crooks, and they think everybody else must be a crook. So, he's not a crook, but he was a very devious type of guy. All right, so anyway, in verse 2, and he put the maidservants and their children in front. And so they were the first ones going to be meeting Esau. So if he's out to get them, he'll get them first. And Leah and her children were behind them, because he didn't really love Leah. And then Rachel and Joseph were last. And Rachel and Joseph were Jacob's favorite. He loved Rachel, and Joseph was the only child born to Rachel at that point in time. And so he really loved Joseph. Verse 3, then he crossed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. So now he's doing everything he can to please his brother. Remember, he sent some presents ahead of time too in the last chapter. And so verse 4, but Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. So here's Esau, sees his brother. Jacob is scared to death. Esau comes running at him. Can you imagine how his heart was pounding when his brother comes running at him? But then he gives him a hug and kisses him, and that's what men do in that part of the country. And they both wept and they cried, and so everything was okay. But remember when back in chapter 27, if you read it, and Esau was a man of outdoors. He was a man that lived for the moment. And so people, now Jacob wasn't. Jacob was a schemer and a planner, and he had to guard his back all of his life. He had to be watching his back because of all the things that he did to get what he wanted out of other people. But Esau was just a hunter, and when he came in hungry, and he just said, "Oh, you can have my birthright. I just want something to eat." And so he was a man that lived for the moment. And so he's pretty much forgotten about all this that the last 20 years took place. Now, verse 5, and he lifted his eyes and saw the women and children and said, "Who are these with you?" So he said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." And now Jacob's calling himself a servant still because he wants to just really butter up old Esau. Verse 6, then the maidservants came near, and they and their children bowed down. So the maidservants came, and then their children were behind them. And verse 7, and Leah also came with her children. So Leah shows up, and then behind her are her children. And after that, Joseph and Rachel came near, and they bowed down. Now, here's an interesting thing. Everybody previous to Joseph and Rachel, the mother came first, and then the children. But in the wording here, then Joseph and Rachel came together, and they bowed down. And so it was a little different. Now, Joseph was an only child, and I suppose that he was a little different than all the other kids. And these weren't really young kids at this point. Some of them were in their late teens and so forth. So then Esau said, "What do you mean by all of this company which I met?" And he, that is Jacob, said, "These are to find favor in your sight, my Lord." So he's still trying to butter up old Esau. But Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Now remember, he sent all these things ahead, and he was afraid. And now, but Esau says, "Hey, keep these things." Now, we'll stop for a minute here, and we'll think. Jacob has just come from living with Laban, who is a very materialistic type of guy, and so is Jacob, as a matter of fact. But here's his brother who lives for the moment, and he says, I don't need this stuff. And Jacob said, No, please, if I have now found favor in your sight, then receive my present from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face, as though I had seen the face of God, and you were pleased with me. Now, if you remember, the last time he saw Esau, Esau's face was not like the face of God. He was mad. Oh, he was mad. And now he sees him as the face of God, and that's because Esau has some forgiveness in his soul, in his being. And that's what God is all about. He's all about forgiveness. And then you also have to remember that the 20 years that Jacob lived with Laban was not family. Although Jacob married his daughters, he was a Syrian. God called him a Syrian. He was not part of the Jewish family that Jacob was. So family is important. And so here's Esau, and he's forgiving Jacob. And Jacob's not used to it, because for the past 20 years he's been living with his uncle, who was not really considered family. So in verse 11 he says, "Please take my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough." So he urged him, and he took it. And now he says, "God has dealt graciously with me." Well, the thing is he's only limping on one leg. If you remember from the last chapter, he wrestled with God, and God touched his thigh, and he could have whipped him, but God dealt graciously with him. And of course, that's kind of off to the side, but God has provided a lot for him. So verse 12, then Esau said, let us take our journey, let us go, and I will go before you. So he's wanting Jacob to follow him now, and they'll head back towards Esau's house. But Jacob said to him, my Lord knows that the children are weak, the flocks and herds which are nursing are with me, and if the men should drive them hard one day, all the flock will die. Now Jacob could have said, I've been up all night. If you remember, this is the day after he was up all night, so he's tired. But also, Esau here is being the older brother, and he's saying, I'll lead the way, you follow me. And that kind of probably got under Jacob's skin a little bit, so he says, no, let's do this another way. So verse 14, so Jacob says, please let my Lord go on ahead before his servant. He's still calling himself a servant. And I will lead on slowly at a pace which the livestock that go before me and the children are able to endure, until I come to my Lord in Seir. Now Seir is down south. It's on the east side. It's a mountain range area down on the east side of the area known as Canaan, and it's south of the Dead Sea a little bit, down to the southeast of the Dead Sea. So that's where Esau lives. And then Jacob says, I'll come along to Seir later on. But I don't know if he was really telling the truth, because if he was to go along with his brother, it would create a permanent bond with Esau. And Esau is a picture of the world and the flesh, and not the devil, but the world and the flesh. And God doesn't even want Jacob to become united in a permanent bond with those kind of people. So Jacob's using a little wisdom, but also I don't know if he really trusts his brother, because he was scared to death of him. So he says, I'll come later, but he's not really telling the truth, because in verse 15, Esau said, now let me leave with you some of the people, remember he had 400 men, who are with me. But Jacob said, what need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. And so he says, I don't need you guys to stay with me, because what his plan was he wasn't going to go to Seir, but as we'll see here pretty soon. So he was wanting, because if he left some of his men with him, then he would be partially connected to his brother, partially obliged to go down to Seir. And so he's saying, nah, let's just not do it that way. I'll be okay. And so anyway, let's go to verse 16. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. So Esau turns around with his 400 guys, and they head on south down to the area there where Seir is. And Jacob journeyed to Succoth, built himself a house, and made booths for his livestock. Therefore, the name of the place is called Succoth, because of the booths that Jacob made. But anyway, so Jacob didn't really go a lot further south from where he had been with his brother. He went just a little ways, and then he stopped, and he took a break, and he built a house, and he let everybody get rested up. Because if you remember in the last two chapters, he was rushing to get away from Laban. So now he's gonna stop and let everybody recuperate. And so verse 18, then Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem. So now Shechem is in the land of Canaan. So now after he's built the house and let everybody rest, then he moves safely, and that's a key word there, because God was taking care of him the whole time. Even though he didn't, he wanted to take care of himself like so many of us. But anyway, so he moved to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padam Aram, and he pitched his tent before the city. So this is the end of the trip, coming from his uncle's place in Padam Aram, or his uncle's Laban place, which was in Haran, and that's up there in the area there same area. And so now he's finished his trip to the land of Canaan from Padam Aram. Verse 19, and he bought the parcel of land where he had pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. Then he erected an altar there and called it El Heel, or El Elohi, which is God, the God of Israel. And so here he is. He's traveled now. He's all the way back, quote unquote. He's back home. He's in the promised land. He's in the land of Canaan, and he's going to settle in there. And he's finished all the connections he's had up north, and he's finished the connections he's had with his brother, although he'll still stay in touch with his brother as time goes by. So that's the end of chapter 33. And I hope that it blessed you. And thank you for stopping by the Bible blog. And I hope you'll come back. And I pray and hope that if you're a visitor here, that you have put your trust in Jesus. And if you haven't done that, I encourage you to consider it and think about it. And do a little research if you don't understand, because Jesus died on the cross because he loves you. All right? Well, God bless you, and thanks for visiting.